Right, and so we are back now, and we are entering the second phase of this tutorial, which is to create an actual animation. Now, when we animate, there are a number of different ways to do things, and I think in this case what we'll do is we'll use these assets that we have just created with the sun, with the rays, and we'll load that as a brush and then use the brush keyframer. If you look under the animation menu, there is a brush keyframer to keyframe its position, its size, its transparency, and some other parts. So what I'll do, first of all, is I'll need to decide what are the dimensions of the animation I want to create. I don't need these assets anymore. I have saved everything in files. Let's go and close all these. What I do need is perhaps take a look back at the original images. Let's go open one like this one here. This one had the storyline, and the reason I wanted to take a look at that first is that it actually provides the background also that we might want to use. Now that might be different in your case. Maybe you have a different background in mind, but the idea is that we'll look at this. This is a scanned image, and we actually have a nice piece of a texture or pattern on it that would be actually nice to use. And then we'll need to have the sun here a little bit smaller at first, gradually move to the center, perhaps even turn, do a little rotation thing, and then get bigger and bigger, and eventually fill the screen to about this level. Right, and so that's what we want to do, and we don't want to do that on a plain black background. We have a nice gray background here with a little bit of granularity, courtesy of the scanner and the paper that it came from, and so we could actually just use that as the background. So let's do that. Let's go use the selection tool. We could use the rectangle to alpha and select a portion of this. It's probably still too big anyway. We will want to crop and make it smaller. So this could be a way to select a portion that we will use as the background image. Now maybe you have some special needs or requirements for it to be a more of a wide angle or a tall image or something like that. That's really for you to decide what the dimensions will be or what the aspect ratio will be. You can also use the control key down and drag around to shift the alpha, that selection. Again, control and shift key both together will move the entire image. Control by itself with the left button dragging around will move the alpha channel. What I'll do though, there's another way to make this, to crop to that area. Let me do Control D to clear the selection. I'll show you this other tool, and that's the image crop tool. That is new in version 9.0, I think, 9.1. And what I'll do is I'll use the crop tool to select the portion like so, indicate where I want to go with it, and again you can use the left and the right button to zoom in and to move around. And so with this you can also get a fairly good shot at a portion of interest to crop, and then when you're ready you right click and crop to that. This one's still big. It might be too big. It might be of interest to blur it a little bit. Maybe it's starting to show too much granularity. So let's first of all change the dimensions. Verify that it's not an odd dimension, because when you work with video, trust me, you want to have even dimensions. So look at the image info that you got from cropping, and many times when you crop it manually, this is one of the things that happens. You have odd numbers. So let's just change that. And actually let's use one of the dimensions under the image resample. Where is it? There it is. Let's give it something like 640, or let's say 960 by 540. That's a common dimension. Let's uncheck the constraint and then set the 540. Or is it 940 times 560? I forget. 960 times 540. There you go. We have a preset for that. So that's one of the that's the quad HD. So it's one of the presets that we want to use a lot. But the problem is that it's a bit grainy now, and we may not want to show that much grain. So next thing we'll do is first of all store this image, because we may end up changing our mind and go back to it. But now we'll blur it a little bit under the filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and you can see here with the side by side part of it will be blurred and the other part will not, so you can adjust. The right side is blurred, it's applying it, and then the left side is not, so you can see how much you really want. Okay, and when you're happy with that, you apply it everywhere, click OK, and now you have a slightly blurred background. That's going to be the background, the basis of our animation. So let's say we want to store this one as well, and this is really one you probably will want to save as a file as well. So let's go save from here, file, save, and say this is my background. This is, or just background, right? Let's not be a poet. Background 1, slightly blurred, okay, and we could have this as a BMP, a JPEG, which is not lossless, but it's probably okay. There's enough noise in there that we don't care. PNG would be okay too. Let's keep it as a JPEG, and it will ask us for the quality. 80 and up is good. Let's keep it something like this. And so now we have this image. We now use this as a basis for the animation, which means we need to create an animation. We need to say, okay, let's create a placeholder where we will have not just this one frame, but a whole bunch of them. So animation create is where you'll go for that, and in there you can say how many frames you want. Now let's put our thinking hats a little bit together here. If this is going to play as an animation, you'll need to think about at what frame rate is it going to play. Do you want this to be 30 frames a second, or is it going to be a little bit choppy, like 10 frames a second, or even slower? Probably it's a good idea to try for 30 frames a second. Alright, so 30 frames a second, but this is how many seconds long altogether. I mean, this is how many frames. You can enter it in seconds, click here, and it's at 24 frames per second, at 24 FPS. No, we will want this to go at 30 frames a second eventually. And here, how long do we want it in seconds? Well, if you want this to be 10 seconds long, it will need 10 seconds of 30 frames per second each, so a total of 300, and that's what it calculated for us here. So with 300 frames in there, how much memory does it need? I'm on the system here with 16 gigabytes of RAM, but Dog Waffle is not a 64-bit application. It will not be able to allocate all of that. However, it tells us here that it needs about 444 megabytes. That's okay. With a 32-bit program like Dog Waffle, we can go up to 2 gigabytes. So we have plenty more to go. If we wanted this to be 20 seconds, we know we would be double the 10 seconds we initially chose, so it will need 600 frames, and it needs about 889 megabytes. So this entire one clip, we could potentially make it probably 4 times as long. We could make it 1800 frames. No, like here it goes red, so we're going over the limit allowed. Let's try 1600. Still too much. So I don't know, it might be, maybe I totally messed up my calculation here, but yeah, looks like 1400 might be just where it's too much. So 1300, that's still good. 1928 megabytes required. Now I wouldn't push it if you don't need it, right? So go practice this on small samples and smaller bits initially, and then go to where you really want to be with it at some point. Let's go and say we need 800 frames. That will be 20 seconds long. And you know what, that's even too big for a demo, so let's keep it 400. That's what did I say? Oh no, that's not okay. 300, there you go. 300, that's 10 seconds long. Okay, and what we'll do is we'll have it copy the current frame, which is the slightly blurry, slightly blurred granular gray. Copy that. So now we have a sequence of images all the same. We can scrub through that, you don't see a difference. You can see here they're all the same. Alright, this is one you may want to save also. So let's go to animation and save. Save this as a first animation. Alright, so let's call this one 1. And the file type is DWA, Dog Waffle Animation. This is a quick memory dump. It's not going to ask you questions for extra parameters or compression codec or other options. It's just taking this entire memory buffer and dumping it to a file. And if you have a fast hard drive, it's going to go really quick. So now let's say we want to create an animation going along that. Well, as I mentioned, we have this sun that we can grab here with the rays, And this sun, we can either paint it into this frame and then we could paint it into the next frame and so on. That's not what I want. Let's make sure we actually look at the first frame. If I paint it here, you can see you can see some changes here, but it's only on one frame, and it would be way too tedious to manually make it go from upper left corner to the center and also change the size and yada yada. That would just not be the right way to do. So what I'll do instead is go to the animation menu and do a called the brush keyframer. What the brush keyframer will do is grab a snapshot of the entire animation and show you a timeline slider underneath it. You can resize it here, and you can then see the timeline slider here, and the sun has been placed in the middle. Well, if you click and drag, you can see you can actually move it around. Okay, and you can see the scale, the angle, the opacity, and these parameters can be keyframed. There's a plus key here to add to set a keyframe. You can also hit the enter key or hit the K for keyboard shortcuts or keyframe, and then this one here will delete a keyframe. So what I'm saying is you can go, for instance, to the beginning and say it needs to be in the upper left corner but much smaller. So let's change the size and drag the scale here, click and drag the number sideways to adjust the scale, right, until it's the size you want. And in fact, you might also want to change the opacity to make it invisible at the beginning. Let's keyframe that. Click once here. Then we'll go a little bit further here and adjust the opacity to fully visible. Alright, keyframe that. Now we start growing this sun. Okay, so from here to here it will have to grow to about this size. Keyframe that. Now we'll also move it. So from here to at this point in time, we will also bring it about here and make it bigger. Keyframe that. So now you can actually scrub back here. You can see what's happening is that we have keyframed these little red marks, these tick marks here in red indicate the keyframes that we have recorded, and you can go and add more. You could do, for instance, this one here. Now here it's overshooting a little bit. You can see that it's going like this and then it's overshooting and coming back. That's because we're doing a spline interpolation, and the mathematics for the spline will overshoot. If you don't want that, you can do a linear interpolation. Click on this and that will allow you to go exactly to that point and stay there. It's a little bit choppier though if you have sudden change of directions. It doesn't do the smoothing along that. But let's say we want to go to the very end here and keep growing even bigger like this, and also move it down a little bit, and on top of that also rotate it, spin it around, like change the angle like so. Okay, and keyframe that. So now we have an animation where a lot of things are happening. Okay, and that's the linear transition and animation. Now there's also one more thing we need to do, and that's to change the opacity. So right here we still want it fully opaque. Let's keyframe that, and then right here at the end we need it to disappear, and in fact perhaps even get bigger like this, and disappear meaning the opacity goes back down to 0, so it becomes fully transparent and invisible. Keyframe that. So now we have a transition like this. Okay, so we have about what, 7 or so keyframes, 5 or 6 of them, and you know, you could enable the motion blur if you have some fast moving parts. Let's not be too sophisticated though right now, let's just leave it like that. You can do the align path. That will actually automatically rotate it along the path. That means you lose a little bit of control of where exactly it is turning and where it's not, but sometimes it's a good helper. There's also some other options here. You could have the sun in an additive mode rather than replacing. You could have it in divide mode. You could have all sorts of other effects here, XOR, and that's not what we want, but it's good to know that you have some other options here and how the pixels are blended between, or rendered between, the brush and the background. So now let's go render that. Right, we have previewed, we have defined the path in the brush keyframer. Now it's time to render. Click on render. Your button may be at the bottom. We are doing some changes in this version 9.2 that's coming up, so there have been some changes. But now it's rendering this, and we have now completed our animation. So this is animation 101. Let's go turn the preview off and scrub through the animation, and there you go. You can see it now. Now sometimes you need to add other animations to that. You may not quite be done yet. Maybe you want to add a piece of text to that. Let's see how we can add another piece of text to that. So what we'll do is we'll say, okay, we need to have a piece of text. There's a text tool right there, and that text will be saying you can, let's see, say something something good. In a perfect world, in a perfect world, the sun would always shine on me. There, let's not be too modest. And let's go change the size of that. Also, there's a F for fonts here. That's the font browser or the font lister. Maybe we want to change the size and the type of font. Let me find one that I like. Arial black. Yeah, that's easy to read. Let's make it change the size here and keep it about this much. Okay, so now grab the corner of the lower left corner of this text box until you see the resize handle or cursor, and make it the dimensions you want and the shape you want, so the text is roughly the way you like it. Now you want not too close here, you don't want to crop it off, give it a little bit of margin there. And then also, if you click and drag on the outside of it, it repositions it. Maybe you don't need it left justified, maybe you need it centered or right justified. There's a few more options there. And now you say, okay, that's good, I need this as a brush, because again, we'll take it into the custom brush, the keyframer, the brush keyframer, like we did for the sun. So we can actually turn this into a brush directly. Now perhaps we need a different color also, so let's select kind of a red, a little bit of a purplish red. There you go. And at that point I think we are ready to make this into a brush. Click on here, make brush. And so now preview, there it is, there's the brush. Now we may want to store this brush and perhaps even store and manage copy like we've done before with the sun. We may want to add a little bit of a border around it. There's a trick here to make the text get a little bit of an edge around it. If you increase what we call the keying on the transparency, go to the transparency here and use the key grow, and that will add a little bit of it'll increase the keying, the transparency or the opaque part, and start to reveal the color that you had in there. In fact, that's a shortcut you can use with the keyframe, I think, here, isn't it? Maybe not. You can do it here from the transparency, key grow. There you go. So we got a nice little edge around it. Now again, this is the brush that I want to use. Let's store it because it's a very valuable one. In fact, that's one that you might want to even keep here. Again, just like the brush image of the moon, we can go and in a perfect world, right? In a perfect world. There you go. So we have this text safely tucked away here, and we can go and get ready to animate that in the brush keyframer, just like we did before with the moon itself. Let's go to the brush keyframer in the animation system. In fact, before we do that, let's go save the animation. Right? Shame on me for not doing that automatically. Save often is really the mantra for 3D animators and 2D animators too. And artists that do a lot of digital artwork, you want to save often. So let's go save the animation. This time is number 2. And that will give us a snapshot that we can go back to in case something goes wrong. So at this point, let's go and put this sun here, put this text into the animation, and I'm going to show you a nice little trick here. Brush keyframer, right? So we'll do the same thing. It still remembers the animation that we had before, and I'm not sure if that's going to work for you if you have version 9.0 or 9.1. You may have a bug that's going to show if you do that, but there's something that we have fixed in version 9.2, and so soon enough you'll be able to use that, because there will be a free update if you have version 9.0 or 9.1. So what you can do here is you can see it's actually applying the same transition, the same transformation, because it still remembers the path in which we changed the visibility, the opacity. The text disappears with the sun. We change the size, the position. Everything looks like in perfect synchronization, which is really neat if you want to have some sort of a label or a text attached to a moving object that you meticulously animated in the brush keyframer. You now have the ability to have something else go with it as well. In this case though, I don't want that, so I'm going to go and clear the animation, or clear the keyframes, and I'm starting here, and the sun will basically do its own thing. The text will have to be animated in a new phase. Now the text is not going to be visible initially. I want to show where the text is appearing, moving to the side, and then disappearing. So sometimes around this, the first part, the text is not visible, and around here is where it's going to become visible. So I'm going to say where it's going to be appearing and at what size. It's going to be at this size around here. Let's keyframe that. Now just before that, I want it disappearing and very quickly move to the left. So it's going to appear to move from the left to the right. In fact, let's make this even bigger. You see a little dot here, a little pixel. That's the current position. You can go sideways from that and keyframe that, and then that way you can see the line. Is it horizontal? Maybe not. So maybe you need to move down a little bit further and keyframe it this way. And then that way you have a line that's going sideways, and you know that's going to be a sideways motion. Now you can also change the opacity at this point, so it's disappearing. Keyframe that. So now we actually have an animation in which it's moving sideways very quickly, right? Like this, over just a few frames, and then we want it to stay there for a while, but kind of drift a little bit softly. So we want to find where's that last dot and move it. Not a big amount, just a little bit, but again, just horizontal. So let's go around this much, and it's a much larger distance on the frame timeline, so that means it's going to take longer to drift that way. Maybe we also want to scale it up a little bit, just a little bit. Keyframe that and see what we get for that. So we have it initially, we need to actually, initially it's going to be here, and we need to have the opacity all the way 0 here as well. So it doesn't matter where it is, it just needs to be invisible. So keyframe it at the beginning, and then it appears at this keyframe. There you go. And now it's starting to drift and resize, and then at the end we have it kind of hush away, going sideways really quickly. Again, we have it like zoom over here to the right and fade away again, so like this, and keyframe that. So now we have an animation that looks like it's coming in, zipping in from the side, and then kind of softly drifting, changing size, and then zipping away to the right. Alright, so let's go do that. Now here's an example where it would be also nice to add some motion blur. Now when it's moving slowly, you won't notice much motion blur, but when it's moving fast, it would be an interesting thing to have a little bit of motion blur. So let's go enable that. Let's enable the motion blur and just hope that this is a good amount of to use. Let's just render that. And again, if it didn't actually look right, we can certainly do reload the animation and redo this. But this is an animation that I think we will be able to really use and enjoy. And we have now the text rendered somewhere along 3 or 4 seconds into the animation. Remember, the whole animation is 300 frames long, and at 30 frames a second, that means 10 seconds. From left to right along the timeline will span across 10 seconds. So we're looking at about 1, 2, 3 seconds where it starts, 4, 5 where roughly in the middle it will end. And let's go verify that. Make sure we play FPS here at 30 frames a second and play that. Now we could possibly do something else and add yet another piece of text, and in this case I'll simply do, oh, I don't know, what else could we do? Oh, let me show you another way to animate that brush. There is a tool here, the curve tool. Right, now the curve tool, has a lot of uses, and you can use it for rotoscoping and a lot of other things. But one also is to render a brush along a path, and then there is more, and is to animate, stroke an animated curve. And so that actually is going to render the brush along a path. So the nice thing about this is a good way to create the path and kind of prepare which way it's going to go. So actually, let's change the text for that one. Let's go back to the text tool, and this time we'll say catch me if you can, right? Catch me if you can. Okay, and the reason I'm doing that is that I'm going to go all ballistic all over the scene here for the animation. So I'm going to say that's the animation. Let's that's the text. Let's give it a greenish tint for this one, and make this the brush. There you go. And so now this is the brush image. Let's go store that one, and that's the image. Actually, this one we also want a little bit of an edge around it, so let's go use that trick again on the transparency and grow it, so we have a little bit of a white edge around it. And in fact, we could do even more. There's a lot of really cool stuff you can do here, like drop shadow, animated brush. Where is it? There's gosh, I forget. But I mean, there's a style there. There is a transparency controls for the feathering. Add a drop shadow to the brush, so you can see there's a little bit of a drop shadow. Let's OK that. So now we have a drop shadow added. And what I'll do is make this. Let's store this brush, store and manage it. Don't need the original anymore. Yeah, right. Always be careful when you delete an asset like this, right? So what I'll do is use this as the image to draw along a path. So let's go to the curve tool to draw the path. You place the path by saying, for instance, click here, and that's the first point. And then you click somewhere else, and it draws a line to it. And then click somewhere else, and it draws a line to that. And when you click again after the third, when you go to the fourth one, it actually starts creating a smooth path. Okay, so you can create very, very complex paths with that. And what I'll do is perhaps move some of the points around to a slightly different position. I don't know, there is really a lot of different ways to use this to create shapes for this curve. And you may want to keep it straight line. Right now here it's an interpolation. You can do a catmull or a B-spline, and you can see a different type of interpolation that way, where you have kind of a scaffolding controlling but containing the path. The red is the path, the blue lines are the scaffolding or the container. And or you can also do a plain where is it, right here, not a smooth curved but a straight line. There you go. So it's a straight line interpolation. So, but there's different ways to use this as a curve, and you can make it a closed curve, or you can keep it an open curve. The thing we want to do though is we want to render our brush with the text along that path. Alright, so that's really easy now. What you can do is go to the More option and stroke an animated curve. There you go. And brush the stroke along animated curve. Yes. I have the French version here of oh no, wait, this is not what I wanted. I just realizing it's actually not animating it along there. It's stroking the whole brush each time against the entire frame sequence. Alright, well, that's obviously not what I wanted. There is another way to do what I wanted, which is over here there's an option to animate the brush. I think that's the one I really needed. I don't know, there are so many options and I don't use this tool so much, so it's kind of a discovery every time. Evidently we have 300 frames that we are going to render this through. This will take a little while. I don't think I can hit escape to stop it. Nope. I guess there's always something else we could add, but you can see that it's still happily rendering and it's already about halfway into the animation, so not that much longer. Here we have a third of it done. We can see the frame count here, 105, 108. out of 300. So yeah, unfortunately I'm going to have to wait for this one to complete. Let me pause the recording and come back when it's finished. There, see, that wasn't too bad. Only a few more frames. As soon as this is done, what I'll do is load the animation again. The positions along the path can stay as they are. Let's see, just two more. There you go. So what I created is really a rendering of the brush along the entire path for each frame. It's actually cute when you animate this. It makes some really phenomenal effects too. But that's not what I wanted in this case. So what I'll do is go to the animation and open the animation. And that was the number 2. And there it is again. So I'm still on the path. In fact, if I go back to another tool like the brush or the fill tool, that doesn't lose the path. The curve is still defined, so I can go back to it, and there it is. Now this time I'm not going to use this tool. I'm going to use one of these here. So there is an option to stroke the brush along the path. That's exactly what we did, but in an animated way. It actually did that across the entire animated sequence. Right? So if we use this, where is it? There, it will render just one time this one brush. Now if I use this brush, it will do it with that. So let's see, where's my curve tool? There it is. There. So that's what it did, but on every single frame. So instead, I may want to do the paint a brush against the brush stroke, in which case it also changes the size, and it has slightly different effects, but it's still not what I want. I want to animate it. So there's a fill the shape with the current fill settings. There is a fill it to alpha, and there's one more here, little camera icon here, and that's our frame sequence, and that one is the animate a brush along the path. That's the one we want. Now as we animate it, maybe we want it to also change the angle, so it's not always reading like this, it's like turning around. So you may want to prepare by enabling allowing the transform, allow custom brush transform, and also allowing it to rotate based on its path. I think that will do it. I'm not 100% sure, but either way, let's go and animate that. So now it's doing this this animation that I was hoping to see, and there you go. Yeah, it looks like it's not actually rotating because every image, every frame is its own stamp going down. But we have now the path used as an animation, and that's really what ultimately I wanted to show. So let's go and get rid of this path. You can clear the path altogether here, start over with a new curve, or simply go out of the curve tool, and we now have, let's turn the preview of the brush off. There you go, and we now have our finished animation. Let's go, let's see, catch me if you can. We can probably save this one here too. Catch me if you can, and we have pretty much completed the animation that I wanted to show here. Let's go and play it. Oh wait, where is the text? Did we lose the text? Maybe I didn't save the version with the text. Oh boy, save enough. Yeah, like I said, save often, right? So, but anyway, you see how it was done. You can now go and recreate this too, and that's really what the tutorial is all about. So enjoy, and we'll see you in another tutorial very soon. Happy waffling and howling.